LGBTQ plus best practices for inclusive environments for elementary school parents and caregivers. My name is Michelle Drake. I'm with the Marin County Office of Education. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. This webinar is being simultaneously interpreted in Spanish, and I will now share that in Spanish. So, hola, bienvenidos al seminario web LGBTQ+ sobre los mejores prácticas para entornos inclusivos para padres y cuidadores. Este webinar se transmite simultáneamente en español. Haga clic en el botón de interpretación del idioma que aparece en su pantalla si desea escuchar esto en español. Muchísimas gracias a Asti Cabrera, que es nuestra intérprete esta noche. So today, it just so happens that it's Spirit Day. This is an annual day in October when millions of us come together, we get to wear purple, and it's to speak out against bullying and to show our support for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer youth in our communities. It's so exciting to know that we had 60 people register for this evening's session with the Spahr Center. Our community cares about this and clearly wants to learn more about it. Tonight, we're here to normalize the conversation. It's important that our LGBTQ plus youth know that we see them, we honor them for everything that they are. And even in Marin County, even in California, there is so much that we still have to work on. So we have two amazing panelists joining us this evening. Mavi Pillaton is the Training Institute Manager at the Spahr Center, which is an amazing nonprofit organization here in Marin County that's dedicated to serving, to supporting, and to empowering our LGBTQ plus community, as well as our HIV communities. As the Training Institute Manager, Mavi gets to coordinate, they gets to lead and develop curriculum for LGBTQ plus cultural awareness trainings. They delivers these trainings to schools, to healthcare providers, social service agencies, government agencies, as well as many other types of organizations. They are currently working in several of our Marin districts running these trainings for staff. So that's been an amazing project that we've gotten to work on together. Mavi is in process of completing her master's in education in equity and social justice from the San Francisco State University. I believe, Mavi, you're expected to graduate in December, so that's really exciting. And they grew up and currently resides in Marin with their spouse and stepdaughter. Our next panelist is Jana Barkin, who is an author, educator, and mother. She and her husband raised their family in Marin County, and her younger child is transgender. Jana has worked as a preschool teacher, a director, a yoga instructor, and is now the family programs manager at the Spahr Center. Jana currently supports transgender youth and their families as a facilitator of parent support groups and workshops. She also does parent coaching throughout the community. She's written a book, He's Always Been My Son, which was a #1 bestseller on Amazon and continues to be a valuable resource. So welcome, Jana. Welcome, Mavi. I hand it over to you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. Jana, I might have cut you off, but you can introduce yourself if you'd like. I just want to thank you all so much for being here tonight. I know that evening engagements during the week can be tough. If you're eating dinner right now, keep eating, keep doing your thing. But we're just glad you're here. And Jana, do you want to say a hello too?
Thank you, Mavi. Yeah, hi, everyone. And also really appreciate all of you being here right now. We have 17 participants, so that's really great. We're getting there. And yeah, tonight will be packed full of information and also some heart-opening stories. So really glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And I want to just give like a brief shout out to Michelle and Jana, because I could not be with a better team right now doing this training. And I'm so excited that this night's finally here. And we're all glad you're here as well. So I'm going to share my screen. Can we all see that? Does that all look good? Okay, cool. Okay. So yeah, we are here to talk about elementary school students and how we can best support them as parents and caregivers. And we heard a little bit about the Spahr Center from Michelle, so I don't even think I really need to go into it more, but we are a nonprofit here based in Marin County. We provide a lot of really wonderful programs and services, including Jana's family and parent and family programs. My service that I provide is these trainings. And so we kind of, this is like kind of the perfect team right now to be able to talk to you all about our topic tonight. So I want to give a little shout out to Michelle and MCOE in general, because working with Michelle has been wonderful, and we've been able to provide so many trainings to so many parts of different communities within Marin. Like Michelle said, I've been going to a lot of schools and giving trainings. The fact that we're able to do these parent trainings, like it's just all super exciting, and it wouldn't be possible without Michelle and MCOE and the California Hope Grant. MCOE has a social emotional learning grant through Cal Hope. And so really those two organizations are the reasons why we can be here tonight. So definitely want to thank them for all of their support. And yeah. And then we kind of did an introduction already, but this is, I'm Maggie or Mavi on the left and Jana's on the right. Those are like our official Spahr pictures. And I am the Training Institute Manager and Jana is the Family Programs Manager. And these are both actually fairly new roles, which has been really exciting. And we've been able to kind of work together and also kind of like have some autonomy in our roles as well. And that's really exciting too. Okay, so Jan and I wanted to start with kind of a quick check-in, or kind of like a warm-up, instead of like an icebreaker, like a warm-up. And if you all in the chat would like to respond, this is just a quick question just to get us started. So the question is, can you name 3 historical figures who were transgender? Jana, do you want to add anything about the check-in question?
No.
Okay.
I want to give everyone a chance to respond, and we'll see your responses, but you all won't see each other responses. So
Right.
perhaps we can read them out once people, and if you can't name 3, name any. And also you could say, no, I can't. You could also put that in the chat.
Yep.
Because I would say for me, until I started exploring this, I may not have known 3. Now I can. Thank you for those folks that are responding. So we're talking specifically about people who are transgender, which is different than, yeah, Lisa, you got it already. Got it. Yeah. Yeah. And that's great, because part of the training, Mavi is going to go in depth about the different words and what do they mean and all that. So there's really not wrong answers. It's more about like, we're trying to unpack what we already might know or not know.
I also just want to say, I really appreciate the vulnerability of people saying like, no, I can't. And that's fine. If you can't, like, that's absolutely fine. I mean, like Jana, I think a lot of the historical figures I've learned about I've learned more about them in the last few years. So this is definitely new knowledge, and we're all here to learn together. So this isn't like a trick question or anything. It's just to get us started by thinking about this.
This is great. So people are saying Caitlyn Jenner, Chaz Bono. Some people are saying how far back historically. That's great. Like as far as you could imagine. And yeah, we can maybe name more modern times people, but not so much historical.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
And I think it's also interesting to think about with this question, like, why don't we know these historical figures? Why can't we name them? It's not necessarily like a reflection on ourselves, but like, what have we been taught in school? What have we been surrounded by? What have we put in the effort to learn about? Like, there could be a lot of reasons why we don't know, but it's not like a shame thing. It's just like, it's an interesting thing to think about of why don't we hear more about trans historical figures? Yeah. Jana, do you want to add anything before I?
Yeah, someone mentioned Marsha P. Johnson.
Yes,
she's an amazing local leader. And then also Big Frida. And if you don't know her music, check her out.
Mhm.
Thank you. Yeah, like why don't we? Why is it hard for us? This
Mhm.
is this is what the point of the check-in is. What else, Maddie?
Exactly. Yeah. So I wanted to actually put up some names. This is obviously not comprehensive in any way, but I just put up a list of some people that I have learned about over the years and also more recently. So there are probably a lot of names on here that you don't know, and that's totally fine. Like there's still even some of them where I'm like, wait, who is this again? But some of these names go back to like the 1300s or even earlier. Some of them you might know a little more, like Marsha P. Johnson, who is a big person in the Stonewall riots, or Sylvia Rivera, who is also big in that. So there are, lots of different names here, but they all were a part of trans history in some way. And, they helped in terms of advocacy, and they also helped a lot of laws be passed and things like that, and just a lot of awareness to be raised. So yeah, I just appreciate you all engaging in that check-in with us. And if you think of any others, let us know too. But yeah, this list is definitely not comprehensive, but I'd encourage you all to go look up some of these names and learn more about them. All right, so I think one of the beauties of this kind of training is Jan and I are both definitely like major storytellers. Like we love telling stories, and I think that's one of the ways that I personally learn the most is just like hearing people's stories, hearing people's experiences. So that's definitely going to be kind of a theme as we go throughout this presentation. So I kind of wanted to start off with mine, and then I'm going to hand the torch over to Jana. But just to start, I wanted to show you actually, I found, courtesy of my mother, who I think is actually in this training right now, I have some baby pictures and pictures of when I was younger. So I wanted to start off with this little baby picture. Obviously, like when I was a baby, I didn't know who I fully was. That's, that's pretty common. I'm a pretty small baby in that picture. I mean, who knows who they are? All I know is that I like to chew on Kleenex, apparently. In this second picture, so I'm around preschool age in this picture. I think I'm maybe like 4-ish. Maybe my mom can correct me. Still didn't really know who I was when I was 4, but like I knew that I loved Lion King, still love Lion King. Apparently I loved wearing seasonal headwear, Easter bunny ears, whatever. But like this is the time that I really wish those conversations about all kinds of identities really had started, because I think this is a time when I was about to go to school, I was meeting more people, I was able to obviously like converse more than when I was a baby. And so just being able to have that knowledge around me, I think would have been really valuable. And that's nothing against like my parents. It's just, I think when you're kids, you're exposed to things that you're not even aware of. And there are things that are ingrained so easily in us that kind of go unchallenged when we're that young. Excuse me. So then I also wanted to show this last picture, which I think this was like maybe like early middle school or something like that, maybe like 5th grade-ish. I don't know. I'm not totally sure, but around that age, I knew back at that time that I loved soccer. It was an outlet for me in a lot of ways. I think sports and athletics still are a big outlet for me in a lot of ways. But I look at this photo and I don't really see like me in a soccer uniform. And I don't really think about like the soccer teams that I was a part of. What I see really is like discomfort. I think back to when I was that age and how uncomfortable I felt in my body and how different I felt from everyone around me, growing up in Marin County and identifying in a lot of different ways than my peers and people on that soccer team or even adults around me. So I wanted to kind of point out these pictures because these are the students that we are working with, that we all work with, and that we want to support. These are the ages that represent, I mean, maybe not the baby one, but these are the ages that we represent, and these are conversations that we can have. And I can speak from my personal perspective in saying that I wish we had more of these conversations when I was this age. Now at the ripe age of 31, I can think back to when I was in elementary school and how I didn't hear anything about queer history or trans history, or even just queer and trans people in general. So that was kind of a wish of mine, I think, that I look back on and I wish had been different. So I want to pass it off to Jana real quick, who's going to share part of her story as well and her connection to this topic.
Thank you. I wish that I did add one more in between photo, because the look in your eye before you even told us that what you saw in that third photo was your discomfort. I saw it because I know you and I know how bright a light you are. And I could see it in your younger photos, and I didn't see it in that photo. And it is a look in your eye that I have never seen in you now as an adult. And I also know that look in your eye very well. That is a common look that parents can see in their children. It doesn't mean that they are transgender, but it can mean that there's some real discomfort. Maybe go back to that picture for a moment, Mavi. The third picture, I just can see it on your face. I can see that you just feel awkward. And you know what? Sometimes photos just are like that. And it's not a good photo and we throw it away, but I'm having a feeling that this was how we would have captured you fairly often at that age.
Yeah, and I'll add also that sometimes looking at pictures of myself, whether it's this age or even like in the awkward high school years or something, like it's very uncomfortable. So even just sharing these is like a vulnerable moment, but I appreciate you sharing that, Jana. And I think like, I mean, as you can see, I think you can see like around the time where that discomfort really settled in and I didn't know who to be. I didn't feel like I could be myself. I didn't have the time and the space and the resources to explore who I was. And I mean, you can see it, like you said, you can see the discomfort or just like, you know, lack of sparkle or something.
Yeah. So, can you go back to Amaya's? Yeah, there. So this is the shameless plug for my book, everyone, but more so I chose that photo for a particular reason. That was Amaya. He was assigned female at birth, so we thought he was a girl at this time in that picture still. I always use he, him pronouns for my son because that is who he is. As I write, he's always been my son. But it took us time to understand that. And on the baseball outfit picture, this was his team picture. He played every year until he hit the big leagues, so to speak, which is a whole nother story. That's for a different time. But you can see the sparkle in his eye there. And he was a really bright, sparkly boy when he was little, or kiddo at the time. Girl, we called him. But after... he was known as a tomboy, but you know, he wasn't the average tomboy. There were signs or signals, and these signs are not always the signal that someone is trans. But for my child, it was true. The way that he insisted on being dressed, to his toys that he always chose, that and the ones that he discarded purposely, the way he wore his hat all the time as a talisman announcing who he was. And the way he carried himself and moved his body. But my understanding and acceptance developed over a long period of time. I'm an early childhood educator. Perhaps I was aware of gay people that maybe could be gay when they're kids. People don't just automatically become gay or trans. They are who they are. We just might not know this or recognize it or have any knowledge about this. And I think that's where we all were when my kid was little. And I think Mavi's parents as well, when Mavi was little, that our understanding and acceptance as parents developed over a long period of time. It followed closely with my child's understanding and acceptance of himself. And in all of my work now, I just really am so committed to providing a safe and informational environment for parents, for family, for friends, educators, and that this is a safe place to ask questions. Mavi, thank you for, letting us know that this is actually your own held experience. And so just knowing that is like a big vulnerable step for a presenter to disclose to us their own experience. So I just give you a lot of support. This is my son. You can see after his transition, he's 20 in that picture, and his bright light is there. But in the in-between, that light was not there. And you can see it in pictures, just like Mavi was showing us theirs. So I'm so grateful that we're doing these types of trainings and that people are here to hear it. Because when I asked for this very type of training in 2011, we just weren't ready. And it's the same school district that now is engaged and will be doing a full district training. My kid grew up in Novato and they just weren't ready yet. They weren't ready to, as they said to me, open up the can of worms. And we know that we never want any child or any family to feel that something very, very personal and private as someone's gender identity or their race or their religious background or their cultural backgrounds. None of that is can of worms. And that it's really important that we stay current and that we learn and grow together. So thank you so much for having us here. And look at my son. He says, you think about gender way more than I do, Mom. And I say, great. I'm doing my job. Thanks, Mavi. And thanks, everyone.
Gosh, Jana, you're amazing. I could listen to you for like hours and hours and hours. I'm just so thankful to be here in this space with you. And yeah, I love that we're mixing in kind of the personal perspectives and the personal stories in this training, because I think that's the tie. That's the thing that brings us all here. And yeah, so I think, normally in our trainings, I go into like LGBTQ plus identities and what is gender and what is sexual identity. And I'm definitely going to do that now. But I also kind of want to put like a personal spin on it again, because I don't want this to necessarily be a lecture. I want this to be a learning opportunity. And I want it to be from these stories that we want to share and from these lived experiences. So as you probably know, the LGBTQ plus acronym has a lot of fun letters in it. Those are the letters that represent each, those are the words that represent each letter. The plus category is obviously pretty big, pretty booming, lots and lots of different identities. And in this acronym, we cover both gender and sexual identities. So the gender identities that are covered are traditionally the non-cisgender ones. And cisgender might be a term that you're familiar with, maybe it's not. But it's essentially a term for someone who identifies with the sex they were assigned at birth. So let's say they were assigned female at birth and they feel like a female, then yay, like they could use the term cisgender. And then transgender can mean a lot of different things. It's like a big umbrella term. It's not identifying with the sex you were assigned at birth, but that can mean so many different things for so many different people. So for example, for me, I identify as non-binary. And that essentially means I don't really identify as a boy or a girl, or not even really both, like sometimes neither. It's kind of a fun little mixed bag. And I just don't identify with the traditional gender binary norms. So yeah, there's a lot of different experiences within the LGBTQ plus community. There's been a lot of additions and letters and all kinds of things that I'm sure you all have heard about. But really this evolution in terminology has to do with just being more inclusive and really the principle that everyone experiences identities very differently, even if it is on the surface the same identity. So for example, one person who's trans can experience life very, very differently than someone else who's trans. And there's so many reasons for that, which we'll get into. But I think just noting that like there's a lot more inclusivity in this community because of more adopted language. And yeah, and so then when we go into gender, there really are kind of three dimensions of gender. So again, we're not going to get super technical here, but I just want to mention that gender is much more than like someone's anatomy, and it's much more than like the sex someone is assigned at birth. There's really a body element, which is like how we feel in our bodies, how society can gender us based on our body and our appearance. So another little personal tidbit about me is I always felt very disconnected with my body. There's certain parts of it that I was like, oh yeah, that's my body, that feels right. But there are also certain parts that just did not feel right. So actually earlier this year, I got a gender affirming surgery and really was like, this is the transition that I need to make to feel right in my body. And I have never felt more right in my body after doing that. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes we're just born in bodies that don't feel right for us, and that's okay. Sometimes we have the privilege of being able to make a transition like that, and some folks don't. But so just understanding that like body is a big part of gender, but it's not necessarily just our like biological anatomy. It goes far beyond that. And it is very complex. I'm probably going to keep saying that. Then there's also an element of gender that's like our social aspect, like our gender expression. So like I chopped all my hair off a few years ago, and like that was super fun. And like that's definitely a part of my gender now. It's like I call it like my Jimmy Neutron hair. It just like sticks straight up, and it's a look, but it's definitely kind of a part of my gender expression. And then identity is kind of like the internal, like mushy, emotional part. Like how do we feel inside? And then also like, are there certain words or labels or pronouns that we use to convey who we are? So for example, a part of my gender identity is using they, them pronouns and using Mavi. Yeah, so all those three things together are really what make up gender. It's not just our body. It's not just what clothes we wear. It's not just our pronouns. There's all these things that come together. So you can see why these complexities can be really difficult and really hard to explore, especially at a young age when you don't have the necessarily the terminology or the shared language. And then lastly, I also want to mention sexual identity. I use the term sexual identity. It's synonymous with sexual orientation, just so you know. But I use sexual identity, and I like to include these kind of three guiding, framing questions that I think can kind of set the stage for what it really does look like for folks. And so there's an element of if someone's attracted to someone or not. Some folks don't experience attraction. Some folks do. And then how are you attracted to other people? So some folks are attracted to people sexually, some are attracted to them emotionally, some romantically. There are all kinds of different variations and nuances and complexities, as you can see. And then lastly, to whom am I attracted? So there are some folks that are attracted to one gender. There are some folks that are attracted to multiple genders. And I think you can see just like this commonality and this theme that everyone experiences life and identities in general, like so differently. And I think that's what makes us so interesting. And a lot of this terminology is just reflective of that. That's all that it is. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into gender identity specifically, just so we have some kind of common shared language. You're not going to be quizzed on this in any way, but just so we kind of understand some basic terms that you might hear us use or we've probably already used. So gender identities, as you can see, there's cisgender, which I talked about. So there's cisgender male, female, and then trans is kind of this beautiful big umbrella where there might be some folks that identify as trans male, trans female, but then there's also non-binary, which is the word that I use. And there could be a lot of different forms of non-binary as well. So like gender queer, gender fluid, agender, bigender, like so many different things. And I can't even begin to list all of them. I think I read some report recently that there's something like 80 different gender identities that have been identified now, which is just so cool. Like, how exciting is that? I don't know. That makes me excited. But yeah, so I mean, you can see that like there is such a variety and diversity in experience, and that's really beautiful. And pronouns are really a way, I think a lot of people are talking about pronouns recently, but pronouns are really a way for us to just convey who we are, and also for a way for us to show respect to other people. It really is a sign of respect by using someone's correct name and pronoun. And I want to normalize the fact that like we can make mistakes with pronouns, and like that's okay. It's going to happen sometimes, but we can also understand that mistakes are going to happen while also holding ourselves accountable for being better in the future and for putting in that effort, because that effort really is important. I always say that like if you use someone's correct pronouns one day, you might be the only person that day that that person hears correct pronouns from. It's super impactful. I also want to give a reminder that pronouns are not necessarily someone's identity. So just because I use they, them pronouns or someone uses they, them pronouns doesn't necessarily mean they're non-binary or trans or whatever. So we don't want to assume someone's identity based on pronouns that they use. They're just a really important tool of language that we can utilize to show someone respect. And then these are some examples of gender-specific pronouns, which we've heard a million times in so many ways, and gender-neutral pronouns, including they, them, and then also some neo-pronouns that might be a little more uncommon and you might not necessarily know, but some folks might choose to use them. And then sexual identities, so same thing. We have straight on the left and LGBTQ plus / queer. Those are kind of big umbrella terms, again, that cover all non-straight sexual identities. And so you can see there's a lot of different kinds of attraction too. Like there's certain kind of sexual attraction, like bisexual or asexual. And then there's like romantic attraction. So someone might use a word like aromantic or biromantic. So that, again, you can see how nuanced this is and how many different ways that we can express or not express what our identity is. But I hope this paints kind of a full picture of what LGBTQ plus looks like and the beautiful diversity and experiences. Yeah. And then I think also like a big hot topic right now is talking about these LGBTQ plus identities and terminology in education, and like best ways to do it in a developmentally appropriate way. So I think it's important to kind of understand what LGBTQ plus inclusive education for young children really does look like versus what it really isn't and what it doesn't look like. So I think I'm a very like visual person who likes to just break things into categories and organize it that way. So I literally made 2 categories. One is it looks like and one is it doesn't look like. So LGBTQ plus inclusive education really does look like developmentally appropriate education. And we'll see some data and some evidence that backs this up in a second. But just to start off by saying that it's appropriate education about all kinds of different people and families. That's really what it's about. It's supporting self-exploration and self-reflection on identities, which, oh my gosh, I so wish I had in elementary school, but even like high school or college, like I would take any of that. It's a way to introduce pronouns and vocabulary and terminology in a safe and inclusive way, discuss and hopefully dispel some gender stereotypes from a very young age. And it really does create a supportive environment for all identities. So not just LGBTQ plus students or questioning students, it's really for all students and all identities to thrive. And then LGBTQ plus inclusive education, really, to really boil it down, it is not teaching young children about sex or any other age inappropriate topics or developmentally inappropriate topics. It is not about that. It is simply teaching about identities and how to create supportive environments for that. And it does not look like making judgments about someone's identities. There's an understanding that, again, we all experience identity differently, and that's beautiful, and that's great. And it's not convincing students to identify a certain way. In fact, it actually really encourages students to define their identities for themselves, which is so powerful. It can be really empowering, especially for a young student. So here's that data that I mentioned. I actually clicked that button a little too early, but that's okay. I want to reiterate, so there is science and there's evidence that backs up everything that I just said. So there have been studies done by notable organizations. This is just one example of one, but you can find others. So studies have shown that even at preschool age, children have the capacity to both comprehend and discuss subjects on gender and sexual identity. And then in addition to that, according to Psychology Today, trans kids know their identity as young as age 2. And LGB kids, so this is speaking just on kids who identify in some form of LGB in terms of sexual identities, they know that their LGB identities are seen as different by the age of 5. So that's a big societal thing. That's an external influence thing. But you can see like this data or this type of education is developmentally appropriate. It's developmentally significant because this is what children are going through in that that developmental phase of their life and at that age. So because of that, it really is our job as parents, caregivers, educators, support people, role models, grown-ups, whatever, to create that time and space for discussion and identity self-reflection, and really give students autonomy in being able to define those identities themselves. So here's just some additional data that kind of backs that up as well, and also just provides a little more context. So a third of LGBTQ plus youth say their family is not accepting of LGBTQ plus people. Less than a third of LGBTQ plus youth chose their family among a list of places where they most often hear positive messages about being LGBTQ. Nearly half, so about 47% of LGBTQ plus youth say they do not fit in with their community. And about half of LGBTQ plus youth say they have an adult in their family they could turn to for help if they felt worried or sad, compared to 79% of non-LGBTQ plus youth. So this is the data, this is the information, and this is the context that shows us why this type of education is so important and why it is developmentally significant. And then to kind of add on to that in terms of that context and that background, I really want to show some national context as well. The LGBTQ plus community has really been under attack for a while now, but especially in 2022, you can see in this graph that in 2022, between January 1st and March 15th, so just the first 2 months of this year, a record 238 anti-LGBTQ plus bills were filed across the country. And about 65% of those were specifically anti-trans bills. And these bills covered all kinds of topics. They covered gender-affirming care, they covered trans inclusion in athletics, and a lot of them included education, like whether to include this in curriculum or not, and whether to provide state protections or not. So you can see that a record was set in 2022 in just 2 months for this anti-LGBTQ plus hate, versus in other years where those records were set in 12 months. So that bar on the right is representative of just 2 months of legislation. And then now that we're in October, that number has skyrocketed to far above 300. So again, a new record now that we're further into the year, but that record was set in just 2 months. And I also want to reiterate that schools in California and otherwise, and federally in other ways, there are legal responsibilities for public schools and specifically public educators for providing non-discriminatory curriculum, teaching practices, classroom policies, etc. So for example, in California, they have these 3 laws. This is an example that Seth's law in 2012 requires public school districts to update and enforce policies and procedures that protect students who are bullied based on their actual or perceived sexual or gender identity. The School Success and Opportunity Act in 2014 requires that California public school districts provide students equal access to programs and services and facilities. And then the Fair Education Act was in 2012, and that requires public schools and educators to include LGBTQ plus topics in their curriculum. So this is a state law by the Fair Education Act that says that public schools are required to not only include these topics, but represent the contribution of the LGBTQ plus community positively. And then of course, there are some federal protections as well that are also kind of being updated like as we speak, like Title IX, I feel like is always being amended to make it more inclusive. But so there's Title IX protections, there's Title VII, and then hopefully there's future legislation that'll provide even more specifically federal protections, such as the Equality Act or the Safe Schools Improvement Act. So this is really why we're here. We're here to, oh, sorry, Jana, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I just noticed there's a question and that Michelle is asking, is this K through 12?
I believe it is. Jana, do you want to speak on it too?
I also believe it is.
Okay,
and, yeah.
Thanks for the question. I think that was Michelle. Thank you, Michelle, for the question. So again, yeah, this is why we're here right now. We are here to support youth, and a big way to do that is to support their identity development. We can see there are gaps in schools and otherwise in terms of providing that inclusive education. So how can we support students' identity development at home, outside of school, or even in school? So there are a lot of different ways we can do that. And some of these things are things we already talked about, but like affirming a child's right to define their identities for themselves is huge. Not making assumptions about a child's identity or really anyone else's identity. Using gender neutral inclusive language. So instead of saying like, hey, ladies and gentlemen, just saying like, hey, friends, or like, hey, folks, or like, hey, kids, or whatever. Again, normalizing that mistakes are okay while holding ourselves accountable and continuing to educate yourself. Terminology is changing so often. And I always joke that I do a training and then like a year later, if I did the same training, it would be irrelevant because terminology changes so often. And it is our job to really keep up to date on that so that we can explore these identities for ourselves and for our youth, for our students. So really, we're here to be active allies. We can't just be allies, we need to be active allies. So that really means being active and consistent in our support for queer and trans people. And that can look a lot of different ways. That can be individual education, individual reflection. It could be interpersonal, so like relationships, if you're a student or even like a friend of yours comes out to you, like how can you provide some active allyship, for example? Structural, like looking at schools and other systems and institutions and thinking about what changes can be made to make it more LGBTQ plus inclusive. And a part of being an active ally is also really being aware of how, again, we all experience life differently because of identities, but also because of how our identities intersect. So that can really affect how we experience the world, and it can pose unique challenges because of that. So we could have a few different things going on. As I call it, I have the like fun trifecta. I'm a queer person, a non-binary person, and a multiracial person. And those are three identities that I hold dearly and love deeply, but they for sure pose unique challenges because of those intersections. And so a part of being an active ally is realizing that like some of those effects can be magnified because of these other parts of who we are. So I always give this is like a very, very big list of activities that you can do with your kids. We have a really wonderful inclusive book list that I think through our toolkit, and I think maybe on our website somewhere, I'm actually not sure. But there's a lot of different really wonderful inclusive books you can read with your kids to really start that conversation. So these are just some examples of them. And then I also included these, which are kind of, they might be hard to see, but they're kind of like art activities or even just kind of like writing activities. They're all very much age appropriate. They all come from really wonderful sources like GLSEN or the Human Rights Campaign. So yeah, some of them's like creating a gender snow person or like a family art wall, or like these other two are kind of like identity exercises that are really simple and like you can literally do it along with your children. Like I personally love doing these things. So that's a really easy way to just get involved and do something in a way where you can explore it together, and you know it's developmentally appropriate as well. So before I kind of hand it off to Jana for a sec, I also want to show these two pictures because I used to work at a K-8 independent school and worked specifically with the younger ones, so the K-4 students. And we had this really cool like activist art wall in our after school room. And at one point we had students create kind of like activism posters of things that they really cared about. And that's how we framed it. We did not tell them anything specifically on what to write. We gave some of them some spelling help, obviously, if they wanted it, but we literally just said, we want you to make a poster of something that you really care about and that you think is really important for this world. And these two pieces of art came from a kindergartner and a second grader. So these are, again, elementary students, and these are the things they want to learn about. These are the things they want to see in their world. So as educators and as parents, caregivers, supporters, it is our job to try to help them build that world. So don't doubt the impossible, make it possible. and treat others the way you want to be treated. It's so simple, but like, this is what kids come up with, and this is our job to try to help them create that world. So we have some questions coming up, and Jana, I'm not sure if you kind of want to like tell some more of your story as we talk about those, but I'm going to put up these questions and then I'm going to hand it over to Jana. Oh, Jana, you're muted.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted. Thank you. I am back. So someone put up in the questions, but it's more of a comment, but it's good to bring this in just to summarize what we were talking about the laws, is that these anti-discrimination and anti-harassment laws are TK through 12 specific education content about LGBTQ plus is grade specific. And then where we can find the activities that Mavi put up will be given to you. I think we're going to send out this recording and PDF of the slides and all of that. So we'll be able to provide that. Another great resource is called Teach Pride Reach Wide, and those might be some other different activities, but that is our Spahr Center schools and parent guide, caregiver guide to inclusive practices. And again, we'll make sure that we get that Teach Pride Reach Wide link to you. And yeah, I just think, I would love to hear folks' questions and also any kind of resources that you have found that have been really helpful. That's great. Thank you. We've got, well, let's see, anything in the chat is only going to the panelists, so we'll have to send it out to folks. But here is some contemplative questions. And I think that as parents, it's really important for us to do self-reflection, and that has to do with parenting in general, not just about how we talk about different types of families, how we talk about what's important in our own families and what might be different about different families. So what's true is that we might have different ideas, and also at the same time, LGBTQ plus people should and also have the right to be respected, and that there are families among us who fit into that alphabet soup that some of us might think of it as. And so those of us who do have, well, we could say the privilege of being the majority, which would be not transgender, right? Those of us who are cisgender could just see that, I've never really had to think about gender for myself, other than perhaps how women are treated compared to men, but I never questioned my own gender. So what I say is that there can be a lot of learning and compassion without necessarily understanding. But how about some of these questions? How about if a friend of yours came out to you, as LGBTQ plus, what would your first thought be? And I hope you already got your first thought, right? And if you want to put that in the Q&As or in the chat, wherever you'd like, the presenters will see, but also you might write these down and go with that flow of thinking along that line of, well, what if a friend of yours came out? Or another way to think of it that I love, that was given to me by Cami, who's a marriage and family therapist and ran the school groups or the teen groups that my child attended. What if we thought of it as inviting us in rather than coming out, and how that can feel different? So thank you. One person says, we could say, or this person would say to their friend, thank you for trusting me to share this information with me. And I love that implication that this is a trust relationship, that someone has invited you in. Michelle said, I'm so happy that they chose me to talk to. I just love that. And then I wonder if we could then follow it with, how would you feel if your child came out to you or invited you in? And again, no feeling is wrong. I'm going to give that a moment. And of course, I know many of you are not answering us in the chat, but are still thinking about this. Someone said they feel worried and would not know how to support. Thank you for sharing that. That's a very vulnerable share. And I hear that a lot from the parents I support. And then even more so from parents of trans or gender questioning youth, which of course we could go into, like, why are we worried? What is it about being LGBTQ that makes us worried? Are you worried for your friend? Wow, I love this. Someone else said, wow, if my child came out to me, she said, she'd be thinking, oh, I must have done something right to create an environment that allowed them to be honest with me. Yes. And it's okay to acknowledge when we're actually doing the things. Like, we all want to be we are working so hard to be amazing parents. And how beautiful that a child could feel safe to share with you, because actually most LGBTQ youth do not feel safe to share it, whether their parents are safe people or not. My kid, he was safe with me. He still did not feel safe coming out to me. So how do we provide that? Another woman, another participant, I should say, grateful that they felt safe to share with me, like a lion mama who needed to make sure their schools and friends were ready to accept them. So like, you feel that you would go into lion mama mode, which was definitely was my mode at first. But like I said, they weren't quite ready, but now we're ready. The schools in Marin are really ready. And they do need to hear from parents, because believe me, they do hear when these things come up from people who have fear that this type of education is a brainwash rather than actually providing necessary information. So please make sure your schools know. And it's not only about our own kids. How would you feel if a friend told you that their child came out to them? How would that make you feel? And how would you respond if a friend told you that? A lot of parents tell me they are worried about letting other people in the community know that their kid is trans or gay or lesbian or queer. Which I really think we need to make sure we're saying the word queer a lot, because that is the main word the kids are using. They will have many identities that might fit under this really big umbrella term now, which is queer. Mavi, I wonder if you might want to say more about that.
Can I actually say something? I mean, there's so many things I could say.
So many things we could say.
Is there something? There's also, I'm not sure if you read this comment about LGBTQ plus parents too, but I kind of wanted to speak on that one for just like a second. Is that okay?
I really want you to, because I think that that's an important piece when we're doing these trainings, that sometimes we focus on the youth, but it's really important.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I've been sharing a lot about my personal identities throughout this whole thing, and I appreciate you all listening and being open to hearing about that. But I also want to comment on this comment that we got, that another important group of children are those who are kids of LGBTQ parents. Our kids have to come out all the time about their family. And that is such a wonderful observation and important, really important distinction to make also, because it's not just LGBTQ plus students, but yeah, there's LGBTQ plus families. And I think that's why it's important to really navigate these conversations and normalize them and normalize family diversity. And the reason why I also wanted to speak on this for a little bit is because I am a step parent, a fairly new-ish step parent within the last couple of years. And my stepdaughter is 4, almost 5. And which is a hilarious age, first of all. But also it's been really interesting navigating not just a queer relationship and a child kind of seeing that and it being so normal in her eyes, but there's also kind of a gender aspect of it as well. In terms of shift of like pronouns I've used, or even like a little bit of ways I've presented myself around her. And I have conversations with her all the time where she'll use she, her for me, or she'll say something for me about like being a girl or something. And I'll talk to her and I'll be like, yeah, we talked about this once, remember? Like we can keep talking about this too. But like a lot of times I don't feel like a boy or a girl, and I kind of feel like neither. And like a lot of people can experience that. And she'll be like, oh yeah, right, totally. And so sometimes we'll even ask her, like, how are you feeling today? Like, what are your words today that you want to use? And sometimes she'll be like, today I do feel like a girl. Or sometimes she'll be like, today I feel like a unicorn. Or like, today I feel, and so like it's been really wonderful to kind of normalize those conversations with her. And also like when we're having these conversations with her at such a young age, it's very normal for her to just understand that some people might not feel the same way she does, and it might not be strictly girl or boy or whatever. And I also want to share one more story, and then I'll hand it back to Jana. But my partner and I were dropping her off at TK like a few weeks ago. And the two of us often play with her before school starts, like, and all the kids get going, and we usually get like a giant game of tag or something going, and it's super fun. And at one point, one of my stepdaughter's friends turned to her and was like, this is so fun. Like, I love your mom and dad. And it was actually really interesting because I was like, well, wait, no. But also I was like, oh, that felt kind of nice. I'm rarely gendered as a man versus as a woman, or misgendered as a woman. Like I'm commonly misgendered as a woman. So for this kid to be, it's interesting that the kid's view was like, oh, mom and dad, which is, like we could have conversations about as well. But it was just so interesting to me that like I got gendered as that. And my partner and I kind of looked at each other and we were like, huh. And then even our stepdaughter was kind of like, yeah, and just kind of went with it. Like it wasn't a big deal. It was just kind of funny that she was just like, yeah, like these are my people. And it was a really interesting moment for me personally too, just like not really having experienced that much. So anyway, there's so many different things we can talk about, but yeah, I think a lot about my stepdaughter and her talking about her two sets of families and what we both look like and how they look very different, and how but like for her that's fine. She's got like a pretty diverse mix of family, and like it's a fun story to tell, and it's a fun thing that she can experience.
Thank you so much again for sharing your personal story. And I see more comments that, yes, I agree. If families don't talk about this, LGBTQ people, and the fact that there are families with 2 moms and 2 dads, and maybe even 3 parents or 1 parent, but just the fact that there are so many different ways to be a person, and that they're all beautiful and normal variations of being human. If families don't talk about this, a parent who is identifying as LGBT says, our kids are burdened with having to be the one educating other kids about this for their family. And that's true for the kids who are LGBT as well. So I agree with you that these are nuanced and yet different groups, and yet they have a lot in common, and that it is true that is why I'm really committed to doing this work, because what I've been told is some of the most important form of allyship is that those of us who are not that, that are not trans, that are not non-binary, that we do some of that heavier lifting of teaching about pronouns and even gently correcting people when mistakes are made, because we know mistakes are going to be made. And at the same time, it's really important that we participate in learning and growing together. And so, of course, we might offer things as gently as we can, but there are so many wonderful books. It's so really easy to be inclusive if we practice it. The Spahr Center has a great list of books on the Teach Pride, Reach Wide resource. I also have a resource link on my website. I love these two second questions here. How would you feel if people thought you were LGBTQ plus? Right? Someone comes on to you, someone gives you a flirt, someone just says, oh, you're gay. You know, you're gay, or whatever words, even in an innocent way on their side. But what if, how would you feel? Because we might not know this, but in certain states, it's actually legal defense to use that you were shocked when someone dated you and they thought that they'd be a match. And turns out you don't feel it's a match for whatever reasons, could be body parts, could be identity, could be whatever. People can use the taken by surprise, shock, and awe that someone mistakenly thought that they might be someone who they could be attracted to. You can actually injure and be okay with that. So it's really important that we just think about that. You know, how would we respond if someone, you know, that kind of trope, oh, they're not that there's anything wrong with that. You know, it's even more than that. Like, what can we say? I wonder if anyone has any feedback on that. Like, how would you feel if people thought you were gay? And yes, someone's asking, can we share more on queer? And also want to say thanks for including the importance of the role of love. Yes. And language can deepen our understanding. Interesting. Someone is saying that in Chinese, the word wisdom is representing two characters, representing heart, the duality. Oh, I see. Two characters representing in the word wisdom. One is knowledge, one is heart, and the duality is key. So yes, so it's both the head and the heart. And if we can share the calligraphy, you might be able to. Lydia said that she would feel upset if someone thought you were LGBTQ because you don't like to have an identity put upon you. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And have we as individuals, have you ever stood up for an LGBTQ person being harassed? And I could also add perhaps, or perhaps not, harassed might be a little big word, or a little bit of a big word compared to the word, or someone who's had a microaggression put upon them, which is like might not be seen as harassment, but when it's done over and over, could be. And have you ever stood up, and why or why not? So someone said, as far as if someone thought that they were LGBT, someone said that that happened to them many times. And for various reasons, honored that someone else would include me in their community, but I gently correct them. I assume they have the best intentions and it's only a positive for you. Yeah. And then, sorry, just scrolling down because I love to include the community here. And some Michelle said in your fourth grade classroom, it was such an amazing learning opportunity for you all. Yes, and we're definitely there. I think we can flow right into Q&A as I see a few coming through. And I would just really encourage us all to take that time to, ask those selves, like, how do you know you're who you are? Because when LGBTQ people come out, one of the first things they're asked is, how do you know? And often the youth can't answer that. And then the parents think, well, then they must not be sure. So I'd love to open it up to Q&A. I so appreciate everyone's participation and that so many of you are still here because I know your time is so valuable. So please give us the questions you might have on your mind and know that you can contact us. There's our contact information. Look on the Spahr Center's website. We have a brand new, beautiful website. It's so easy to navigate. It's just really lovely. And it'll let you know about parent programs that I do, grandparent programs. Please send your kids' grandparents to us because they need the support. So fire away those questions. Mavi, I don't know if you want to talk about your trainings coming up while we're waiting for some questions.
Yeah, I'll just mention, Jan and I also wanted to mention that next week we have kind of part 2 of this parent education training. So it's intended for middle school and high school students, the parents of middle school and high school students. So the training will be a little different, but we also want to encourage you that if you want to attend again, or if you know someone that was not able to attend tonight, and would be interested in attending next week, we really, really welcome that, because even if you have an elementary student now, like middle school and high school is going to come. So you're more than welcome to join next week. And Jana has a bunch of really wonderful Sparkle events too. I don't know if you want to talk about that at some point, Jana. But the last thing I want to mention before we get to some of the questions is on December 6th, we're going to have a really, really awesome presentation actually from a friend of mine, Camilo Vila. He's doing a gender inclusive Spanish training. So it's going to be similar to this, but it's he actually did his thesis work on gender inclusive Spanish, and he himself, I think, is a 4th grade teacher. So he works specifically with elementary students. So more details to come on that. But if you're interested in that, also definitely bookmark December 6th from 6 to 7:15.
That is so wonderful. And I wonder if there's going to be English translation, because I feel that I would like to learn about this from the point of view of someone who is Spanish speaking, because there are nuances, especially with language, because of the gendered aspect of Romance languages. Back to our Q&A. So Anne is asking, what kind of in-school trainings do we do? And Mavi, please talk about that.
Can I just answer your question real quick, Jana?
Yeah.
So yes, that December 6th, it will be delivered in Spanish, interpreted into English. And then we hope to do it again in English, interpreted into Spanish. Go ahead, Mavi.
Yeah. So lots of options. So Anne, thanks so much for asking that question. So I'm very, very lucky in that I've been doing a lot, and I'm stressing a lot of school trainings all over Marin County in partnership with MCOE, and then also some other grants that we have and some other wonderful opportunities of schools reaching out to us. So we very much customize and tailor our trainings to the audience and obviously the age range of the students. And then sometimes there are specific asks that a school has of like, oh, this has been coming up. Can we talk really more about like gender neutral bathrooms or something like that? So we do very similar kind of LGBTQ plus cultural awareness trainings where we really focus on like overview of identities, gender, sexual identity, intersectionality, all kinds of that stuff. And then we provide a lot of opportunity for discussions and like scenario, not necessarily role playing, but just kind of like working out some scenarios together and just making sure that everyone feels supported and prepared and ready to tackle these issues. And we also really like to do continued trainings as well. because I'm sure, I bet Michelle was going to say something like that too. But yeah, because I personally don't want to like come in and talk for an hour and then be like, okay, you got this, bye. We really want to make sure that people have that continued support. And so I'm not sure if Michelle wants to add on to that, but
No,
that's definitely something we believe in.
Yeah, absolutely, Mavi. So we are doing a various community of practices within several of our districts. So it's essentially deepening the practice, deepening our work, as Mavi was saying. It's a really awesome opportunity for our staff, our educators, our office staff, our classified staff, our administrators. When you think of a school, there are so many people within that school.
Yeah.
And so being able to work and to touch all of them in this manner is pretty amazing that we get to do that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and we also do, I think the question also asked about student presentations, and we do some student presentations as well. I think this year we were definitely like, we want to get into as many schools as we can and train that staff. So I think, yeah, but we definitely do student presentations as well. So thanks for the question.
Excellent. So
That last comment there.
Yeah.
Would love ways to talk about teachers, schools, about stopping the boy-girl lines and partnerships, which label the kids externally and have other kids or adults call them out in a way that kids might not want. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So love this idea. Some of the things you can just say is, hey, have you thought about using gender inclusive language? Like my child would line up with the girls, however, was such an intensely persistent person expressing himself in a way that looked like a boy. He would get called out by kids that were like, that's a boy, which at the time he wasn't yet describing himself as a boy. So while they were right, it wasn't the time yet, right? So it's like my kid was putting out these vibes and yet still had to line up boy and girl. Now for non-binary kids, they literally could stand in the middle and say, what do I do? I'm not that. Mm-hmm. And so how can we talk about it? We can say, hey, I know a friend of mine. You can just make them up, or you can use Mavi. I think that they would be fine. And they were telling me about when they were kids and how it was really hard. And you can use that as an example, or make a fictional kid up, really, but talk about the story, because it's not fictional that this happens all the time. And also just encourage them like, wow, I really see you being inclusive, and here's some more ways. And then our Teach Pride Reach Wide guide has actual suggestions of all the different words you might want to use. And again, just bringing in books that already have the languaging. And how else can we line the kids up? Thinking of creative ways. How else can we line them up? How about by, are you a person who really likes blues and purples, or are you a person who likes reds and greens? I don't know. There's
your birthday. Line up by your birthday.
Yeah, by your birthday. There's so many ways that don't use gender. And of course, because of the bathroom, and maybe you're going to the bathroom, I don't know, that's like a subject for another day, is, how are our schools set up? Do we have gender inclusive spaces for kids to use the restroom, to get changed for sports, things like this? And then if you need more ideas, please contact us, because Mavi and I both love to have these conversations, and that's what we're here for. And if anyone needs help conversating with their school, we also can help you with that. So it's kind of like, we want to empower as much as we can. Sometimes the kids want to do it. Great. They want help. Maybe the parent can help. You need help. Get us in there. If this is something you want to anonymously do, you want the school to have more accountability, but you do not want to be the person, that's fine. That's what the Spahr Center is here for. So we're here for so many things. And I just want to put a plug in for harm reduction as well. We really do a lot of work with harm reduction. And if you are curious about that, want to learn more about that, that could be like a whole nother realm of our education piece that we do, which is, how to reduce harm, especially when it comes to drug use and alcoholism, but also just mental health in general. And just you being here is helping, because it only takes one adult in an LGBTQ kid's life that is really there for them to make the difference in their mental health and wellness, to be normalized to that of most of their peers, rather than some of the overwhelming statistics that we can get into when we look at the difference in LGBTQ identified kids versus general population when it comes to health and wellness, especially mental health. So I so appreciate everyone who wants to break this down, get into conversations, and if parents need direct support, that's what the parent support group is for. We're very welcoming. Even if you're like, I'm not there yet, that's fine. That's why we have our group. We're there to learn and grow together. And you get to talk to other parents that have been on this path for a while, maybe just a week. Somebody found out yesterday, they're on the Zoom today, or they've been going for a few years. Our group's been running for 7 years. So these conversations with parents are key, because when we ask the youth what they need most, it's that their parents need to get educated, because it's exhausting trying to teach us. It's exhausting. And because they don't always have the answers. Mavi, you once told me, like, you didn't know this. You weren't born knowing this. Do you want to say something about that as we're finishing up here?
Are you talking about specifically like
identity and the words, right? Like, there's a great book, Before I Had the Words, which Skylar Kurgel, a trans man, wrote about his experiences growing up. That summarized it so well for me. He didn't have the words.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah, Janet and I have talked about this stuff a lot, but yeah, I think a very, very big reason why I didn't feel like I knew myself for a long time, and why I have experienced so many mental health things is because I didn't have the language for it. And the people around me didn't have the language for it. And that's not like a comment on them. Like, it's just, it's not common language, and it takes effort, and it takes education, and it takes commitment. And that's what being an ally is. Like, it is a commitment to support. It's not just patting someone on the back and being like, I still love you. Like, that's great, but like, there's more. And I always questioned, like, I don't feel like a female. Like, why does that feel off to me? And so I tried to find other words like gender fluid female, or like gender nonconforming female, or like, I've been called tomboy so many times, and they just all didn't feel right. And my world just completely opened up when I learned more about non-binary, talked to more people that have similar identities. And same thing with queer. Like, when I came out for my sexual identity, same thing. Like, my world just opened up. I just want to say one more thing. I know we're getting close on time, but I really want to give Jana a shout out, because we do this work at the Spahr Center, and we like live and breathe LGBTQ plus stuff. And it's amazing that this is our job. And I often go to a lot of spaces, whether it's a school or even like in my personal life, like to a gym or like a grocery store, and I fear for my safety, or fear that I will feel uncomfortable almost every single place I go to. And when I go into the Spahr Center, I still can feel uncomfortable. There are still folks I come into contact with that I feel uncomfortable with. But when I see Jana, and I'm not just saying this, when I see Jana, I know that she is always going to use my correct pronouns. She's always going to make me feel welcome. She's always going to try to use Mavi. And she's just like always going to brighten my day. And so like when we talked about like that one person that can like really change things, like Jana is that person for me at Spahr. I do want to say that, and I'm not just saying that, like it's true. I can always rely on that. No, and
well,
it's
thank
huge.
you
Like,
for sharing that.
I just really want to reiterate, like sometimes Jana's the only person that uses they them in a day for me, and that I remember that. Like when I'm falling asleep, I think about like, I was only called they them once today, and that person was Jana, and like it's true. So like that one person, or like that one mention, like that's it's so impactful, and I can't emphasize that enough. So,
Well, I will receive that, thankfully, and just know that it is the same for me. I think that it's just so important that we uplift each other, do what we can, we make mistakes, we keep learning, we practice. And I'm glad you brought the word queer up, because that was brought up, and I know there's only a few people left, but I just want to make sure queer, we can go deep into that, like a whole conference, but like a workshop. And when we talk about queer identities, you made me cry, Abby. I'm like, okay. But anyway, queer identity can be, like you said, sexuality, but I also know people who describe themselves as genderqueer. And I also know people who use it for a giant umbrella because they don't want to go into all the identities, but they want to let you know that they are part of queer community. And queer community, for me, in my understanding, is anyone that wants to be included in the LGBTQIA++. There's so many words that instead of having a long alphabet, and sometimes the A can be an ally. And it's not that I say I'm an ally, so I'm part of the community, but if I'm given that, I'm told and invited in the way that Mavi just invited me in, yes, you are an ally, then I do feel that I am part of the community in an important, specific role. And that I would never want to, it's not trying to confuse anyone, right? But also queer, knowing that if we're talking to older, senior LGBTQ identified people, that queer might not be their word, and that a lot of us still have a lot of uncomfortable feelings around using the word queer because we were taught, don't use that, it's considered a slur. So that is an adjustment that is, I'm noticing a dissonance among older LGBTQ or LGBT folks that are very not wanting to use the word queer, and then the youngers, and also like grandparents and grandchildren. I've seen that. So it's language is evolving, and nobody gets to give someone a word that they don't want. So I don't give anyone the name. They get to tell me who they are. And that was just like someone was saying before, like, don't tell me I'm this or that until you know me. So that's a really important part of it. And someone else asked about allyship and how to learn how to be an ally, a deeper dive into that. And I think that would be, it's like, it's not gender 101. It's not LGBTQ 101. It's the next step. And I do have some lunch and learns that I do. And you can find me again, Jay Barkin at the spahrcenter.org. We have a lunch and learn coming up. It's from 12 to 1. And these are monthly events. And the next one is going to be talking about myths. It's on the 9th, and it's myths. I'll make sure I get the info to you, Michelle. Mm-hmm. It's myths and facts about being trans, and then also the last one will be talking about allyship. So taking so that'll be the December one. It's the second Wednesday of each month. And then if you want to have a one-on-one chat with any of us, and then also we can develop more trainings like this, where we say, okay, this is going to be a deeper dive. We're going to talk about allyship, and we're going to, have like maybe more of not a webinar, but somehow more interactive for the group. Like we had those community conversations with another organization. So I think it's really wonderful. Please check out the Spahr Center. Donate if you can. Any amount helps us do this amazing work. We are so appreciative of the Marin County Office of Education.
Thank you so much, Jenna. Thank you so much, Mavi. This was unbelievably amazing. Such incredible information, and just the narrative, the stories, really hearing life experiences. It's touching, it's moving, it's sad and inspirational. And so thank you for your vulnerability and for sharing, and thank you for this incredible, what this is reminding me of is how we're doing the community of practices with our staff and our educators. Let's do this for our parents and our caregivers, where we get to then go deeper into these conversations. I think that would be pretty phenomenal. So we'll connect on that. And we have everyone's email addresses because you registered. So yay. So we can definitely be back in touch with you. And thank you. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it and appreciate your work.
Thank you all so much.
So grateful to be here. Thank you all for being here.
Oh, I wanted to do, if people are still here, there's a 24/7. So if you're in the moment and there's a situation where it's after work hours, you're not going to be able to contact someone specifically at the Spahr Center, there is the Trevor line. They are 24/7. You can go to their website. They are trained trainers specifically to LGBTQ+. And so please reach out if you are, something is happening at 10 o'clock at night or 3 in the morning, whatever. They are there to support specifically to this. So awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Have a good night.
Mom says bravo.
Thanks, Mom.
Oh, that's great. I didn't realize that was your mom when she was posting that great information, because I didn't connect name. That's so great.
She like, I told her today that we were doing this and she was like, can you send me the registration link? And I was like, you don't have to come to all of these, but she wants to.
My mom comes a lot too, if it wasn't at night.
Yeah.
And you know what? I love it because she tells me she learns something new every time.
Yeah.
And it strengthens each of us every time we do the trainings. It strengthens us.
Yeah.
Not only in our own understanding, but in understanding each other, and also what people are wondering out there, and what's cooking out there. Because I mean, one day I would like it to be that this work is obsolete, but it is definitely not. And so that each of us can continue this education, even if we've heard it many times, it's always something new to learn.
Absolutely.
Oh, I feel the same. I mean, even doing the trainings, I feel like I learn something new almost every time too. So this was great. I love being a part of this with all of you. Oh my goodness.
All right.
My mom is still here, I guess. Oh, she thanks you personally, Michelle.
Oh, yay. Thank you. We're so lucky. All right, everybody. It's almost time for me to walk up and go to bed.
Yeah, it's
First I have to eat dinner.
Yeah. Good night. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you both so
You're
much.
welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
See you next week.